One of the key things to understand is that Taylor machines freeze the product to a certain thickness, not a certain temperature. That's very different from every other machine on the marketplace. The way that the way the machine understands that is the amount of energy it takes to turn this beater motor that then turns this pulley through a gearbox and turns the beater. If you remember how it was to make old-fashioned homemade ice cream with the hand crank or the electric motor on top of the ice cream freezer, the way you knew the ice cream was ready is when it got really hard to crank. This is very similar. It takes more power to turn the beater when the product starts getting more and more frozen. And so when it hits a certain set point, the machine knows the product is at the right thickness, and that's when it turns the machine off or puts it into standby mode or an idle mode. One of the things that's really critical is to understand is if you forget to flip the feed tubes, and the feed tube is this mechanism up in the top of the mix hopper, then the machine can pull air in, but it cannot pull in more liquid. And so you end up, when it's in the standby position like this, you end up getting a big air gap in the freezer cylinder. Therefore, the beater turns real easily. Instead of in thick ice cream, it's turning in a big air gap. And the machine thinks it's not cold enough, so it keeps putting more and more cold to the product, and it will end up getting so cold that it will cause the beater to freeze to the side of the freezer cylinder. That does several things. One of the things it does, it will actually flip the breaker in the machine, or the reset button, and cause the machine to go off. So when you pull the handle, nothing happens. So the misconception is everything's so frozen inside that it won't feed out. In reality, it won't feed out simply because the breaker is flipped or the reset button is flipped. It also is extremely frozen, so the next time the machine cuts on, when you hit that reset button and the machine does come on, it's going to jerk these belts and cause them to stretch just a little bit, which causes the problem to get worse and worse. So it's real important to understand that the machine freezes the product to a certain thickness instead of a certain temperature. And if the feed tube is not flipped in the proper sequence and at the proper times, you end up getting a big air gap in there that will cause the problem that we discussed.